Hey everyone, Jason here, entrepreneur, and in this productivity video, you're going to learn how to schedule your week as a part-time entrepreneur to grow and build your side hustle if you're still working a full-time or part-time job. Timestamp table of contents in the description along with some other helpful links to be more productive and organized as a entrepreneur. So let's go ahead, jump right into my screen here. We're going to be using Google Calendar for this, but really you can use any calendar app to schedule out and plan out your week productively and effectively. Now, as we dive into creating your different schedules and what you should and should not be spending your time on, I'm going to start off with a very controversial goal, and that is your goal for this process should be to schedule 20 hours a week for your side hustle, assuming that you have a full-time job. I know if you watch other YouTube videos or you look at Instagram, it looks like everybody else is hustling and grinding and working 90-hour plus weeks, and that's just not really the reality. The data clearly shows us that most people barely hit the 50-hour week mark, and those are people who are super productive. So here, our goal is just going to be 20 hours of real work. So the very first step in our three-step process here is going to be reframe. And that is essentially figuring out where are all the stones. These are immovable obligations or your job that you don't have control over. And these should be minimal. So what you want to do is put on your calendar when those things occur. So as you can see in this particular example, I already have a standing meeting with a friend of mine on Fridays, but the first thing I would do is come in here and I would schedule out when I actually have to be at work. And so we're actually going to go through whether or not you should include the travel time when we start getting to step number 2. But for now, we're just going to have the actual time I actually would hypothetically have to be at the office. And then if I had other obligations, I would go ahead and put those on the calendar now. It's because essentially in the reframe step, you need to figure out what your week's frame is going to look like. What are those actual appointments and stones that cannot be moved or you don't have control over when they occur, like work and maybe some family obligations. So in this particular instance, because we're calling them stones, I'm going to change the color of everything that can't be moved to gray. So to do that in Google Calendar, I'm just gonna go ahead and edit this, and then I'll change the color to gray to show that it's something that is set in stone and I don't really have control over whether or not when it starts or stops. And of course, you don't have to be as OCD with the color coding as I am, but that does it for our stones here. I'm actually going to uncheck our health column for a second so we're not distracted by what our wake up and go to bed time is. So the next step you want to look at here is now that we know what things we can't be moved, your goal in step number 2 here is to start scheduling your side hustle time. Now there are 3 different types of side hustle blocks. We're gonna call them time blocks. And at minimum, you want 2 hours per day. If we're going to try and hit 20 hours, you definitely don't want to try and do 2 10s on the weekend. That's just going to be a recipe for burnout. And you never want to schedule your time blocks. You never want to schedule your side hustle time blocks for less than 2 hours. And this is simply because you want to make sure you give yourself enough time to sit down and really get into depth of work, especially when it comes to the second type of side hustle time block. But I'm getting ahead of myself here. So you really typically are going to have 2 options. You're going to have waking up earlier in the morning, or you're going to have going to bed later at night. Now, I personally recommend doing the morning route. And so what I did when I still had worked full-time at an agency is I would wake up early so that I would have 2 hours of uninterrupted time in the morning that I could work on my side hustle before the workday actually started. Now, something else that you can do is take advantage of the fact that you're waking up early. I'm just gonna go ahead and type this in, side hustle time. Oops, don't capitalize that, side hustle time. And something that I would do in the beginning is on days that I actually had to go into the office, my time block would actually look closer to something like this. And that way, because I was already waking up early, it just made more sense to drive into the city when there was no traffic. And then I would chill at a Starbucks that was just a couple blocks away from work. I'd get my 2 hours in, and then I would go to work. So this is another way that you can actually make this work for you, because now you're driving to work or you're commuting on a bus. Actually, I wound up taking the bus so I could get even more time on working. But whether you're driving or on the bus, it's typically going to be a lot easier to get into work or get into the city earlier. And so if there's a coffee shop nearby, you can spend your 2 hours there and then easily walk over to work. And you have the advantage, of course, less commute time. So I'm going to go ahead and finish up my side hustle time blocks here. And as simple as that may seem, this is incredibly powerful, and I can guarantee you 8 or 9 out of 10 other side hustlers aren't even doing this basic part. So you're already ahead of the game if you do this. Now, of course, there's a mistake here that if we're looking at this, we realize there's no travel time, right? And we haven't really set up when do we actually have to wake up. So you definitely want to make sure that once you have your reframe, all of your stones, and then you figured out whether or not you want your 2 hours to be in the morning or the evening, you need to start spacing things out so that you actually have time, well, not only to eat for one thing, but also your travel time. So in this particular instance, I have to walk a few blocks. So I'm actually going to say that I need to I'm going to give myself 15 minutes to walk down the street. So I'm going to move these time blocks up. You don't necessarily have to put in that walking time, but you want to make sure that you're actually getting the full 2 hours that you intended. And then the next step here is going to actually be deciding when you wake up. So I'm kind of going back and forth between the 2 steps here, but I'm going to drop in health so you don't watch me make 20 different time blocks. And in this particular instance, I had to wake up at 4:30 to get ready for the day, actually get dressed for office appropriate attire, and then of course drive into work. So now that we have our week and we've made sure we have our at least 2 hours per day of actual focused time for our side hustle, we have a couple hours that we need to squeeze in on the weekend. Well, probably more than a couple at this point, right? So for Saturday, I recommend going 6 hours. 6 hours is enough where you can plan your day, you can get a significant amount done, but you don't lose your entire Saturday. So I'm just gonna go ahead and put side hustle time again, just in big bold, and then we'll say on Sunday, we're gonna give ourselves another 2 hours. So we're scheduling 18. You can squeeze in an extra 2 hours somewhere if you really want to hit that 20 mark. So actually, I'm just going to come over here to Sunday night for ease purposes, and I'm going to say from 4 to 6 is going to be a side hustle block right here. And for most of you as a side hustle entrepreneur, this is all the time that you need as long as you're making sure that you're actually spending that time on meaningful work, which comes into the 3 different types of time blocks you should have with your side hustle time. So the first type is planning, which is what you're doing right now. The second type is maker, and the third type is communication. So your planning time should be 1 to 3 hours a week, and that's when you go through this process on a weekly basis, because obviously life changes and things change. You might wind up having a day where you do 4 hours and another day where you don't wind up doing any because you can't get a full 2 hours of work in. It's really important that you stay to that 2 hour mark and not just try and get 30 minutes in here and 20 minutes in there. That's not a recipe for really valuable and meaningful work. So 1 to 3 hours a week for your planning. And this is going to be where you not only schedule out your week, but you also make sure that you have everything you need during those morning sessions so you don't have to talk to anyone. Your goal with these morning sessions is actually to have something called maker time. And so maker time is where you're actually creating something. So this is when you're writing your book, you're writing your sales copy, you're creating your content, you're writing your blog posts, or you're actually doing your client work. So during that 2 hours in the morning, you want it to be 0 communication and 100% focused on what your actual skill is, or focused on something that's going to bring in new clients and customers, like creating your course or writing your book or writing your sales copy. So things like building your sales funnels or communicating with clients definitely should not be done in that morning time. So to change up our time blocks here, we're going to change up this to side hustle, and then we're just going to say plan for our planning time here. So this is going to be our plan time. And I'm just going to change it to orange or yellow. That's yellow. That's definitely yellow. We're going to change it to yellow here. I'm going to leave our side hustle time in the morning blue, but I'll go ahead and change it to maker. So this tells me that I am actively working on something. I'm either working on my skill or I'm working on my product. And this is so important because as a side hustler, it's really easy to get distracted with a lot of things that don't actually matter. So I'm going to go ahead and skip ahead to when I've changed all of these. And so this way you're making sure that you're spending 10 hours on deep, actual, meaningful work. And during your planning time, you want to make sure that you collect all the information you need. So when you sit down in those mornings, all you have to do is open up your laptop and get straight to work. Something that we like to do with our Task Manager Basecamp is when we go to actually create our projects, or when I schedule something out, I'll make sure that when I assign myself that task in my Task Manager, I have all the links to the folders and documents right there. So 100% of my processing power can go straight into creation, and I don't have to worry about looking for an email here, or what was that piece of information. So that's also something you want to do with your planning time. And then of course on Saturday, you have 6 hours for either more maker time, more planning time, or the third one, which is the least valuable, and that's going to be communication. And so when it comes to email, you want to keep your time in your inbox less than 3 hours a week. 3 hours absolutely, it should be the absolute max. Now, when it comes to what you should be doing in your inbox, the only things you should be doing in your inbox are either communicating with your team or freelancers, or communicating with potential customers. Every single other email is a distraction and should be taken care of some other time. And if your side hustle is very heavily reliant on email for closing clients, then I would recommend keeping this the way it is, and then either using your lunch break at work or having a 30-minute time block at the end of the day to do that sales communication, so you protect that 2 hours in the morning to actually working on your skill, your product, or your service. So now the final step is going to be recharge. And that is when we're looking at a week like this, you're really pushing it to the max. I know you see the Instagram posts, you see the YouTube videos of the people who are supposedly working way more than this. They're working all 16 hours of the day, but we only have 16 hours of the day, and we're really pushing our body and brains to the limit when we have something like this. And so what you want to do is make sure that you have time somewhere in your day where you are recharging. And so recharging doesn't mean you have to go be a gym nut or a health crazed person, right? You just need to make sure that you're taking care of your body and you're giving your body and brain a chance to recharge. So there's two basic things you can do. The very first one for recharging is set an actual end day. So in this particular instance, I'm going to move our sleep time to 9 o'clock and move our wake up time all the way up to, let's say, 5:30. So we have a good chunk of time in the morning to get ready, and we're not literally rolling out of bed and jumping in the car, hopping on the bus to work. So we are getting our full 8 hours of sleep. So the first thing you want to do with recharge is set a definite endpoint for your day. Your brain needs to know when it can turn off and relax. So it's very important that once you set this end time, you don't violate it for any reason, which is, so even if, let's say for instance, your side hustle time was at night and it was 8 p.m., well then you would probably want to set something up where at least a half an hour later, let's say 8:30, you say day close. Whether you're side hustling in the morning or you're side hustling at night, you need to create a schedule time block on your calendar where you say, I am done for the day. This is where you close down, you make any final notes, you do any final email checks, and then that tells your brain it's okay to turn off. The only other thing you want to schedule is at least 30 minutes of some sort of activity. I'm not saying you have to go to the gym, but at least 30 minutes of jogging, walking, heck, you could even do yoga if you want, but just something that allows your body to decompress and recharge. It's going to make a world of difference. So in our particular example, I'm going to go ahead and move our side hustle time back up here. I'm going to say our day close is at 6:30. So 6:30, we are completely done for the day. We've been awake 13 hours at that point. And then I'll go ahead and say I'm going to go for a 30-minute walk. And as you can see from the simple 3-step scheduling solution, you've squeezed in an extra 20 hours into your work week. You know for a fact that you have at least 10 hours where you're really focusing on that deep, important work that isn't necessarily urgent. And you've made sure that you've created a cutoff time for your day so your brain can actually relax, recharge, and be ready to hit the ground running the next day. And of course, you can see we do have quite a bit of empty space. and that's okay. We don't have to schedule literally every single minute of the day with something productive. We do have to give our brains an opportunity to wind down and recharge. So thank you so much for watching. Sincerely hope you got some value out of this video, and most importantly, you feel like you have a practical system for deciding how you're gonna fit your side hustle into what is, I'm sure, a very hectic schedule. So hit that like button, subscribe for more deep dive productivity videos for entrepreneurs just like this one, and until the next, keep building the business you love.